Right after World War II, general aviation didn't break the bank. It was within the reach of many. The market was flooded with a lot of aircraft. Aviation was booming with household names like Cessna, Piper and Mooney. Thanks to the war, many knew how to fly, and many more caught the flying bug because it was pocket-friendly. The skies were the limit, and the entry fee was minimal. Planes, reasonable. Fuel, a bargain. Flying lessons, they wouldn't burn a hole in your pocket. The scene was devoid of the heavyweight of product liability insurance, keeping airplane costs grounded. Gas was a steal, and regulations from the government was at a minimum. Until the 60s, becoming a pilot required about 25 hours of practice and an informal ground assessment, with lower safety standards than today, making aviation widely accessible. While it wasn't exactly dirty cheap, it wasn't the luxury it's seen as today. The shift began in 1958, as the Civil Aeronautics Administration (CAA) transformed into the Federal Aviation Administration (FAA). Safety norms got stricter, training intensified, and slowly, the golden age of affordable flying began to descend. Despite a few bumps along the way, the aviation industry was flying high. Most companies were thriving, with a sea of airplanes filling the skies and an ever-growing number of enthusiasts eager to pilot them. This flourishing business environment led to economies of scale, particularly noticeable with Cessna, which was producing airplanes at a remarkable pace. Manufacturers embraced innovation, taking existing models and enhancing them incrementally. The Cessna 120 transformed into the 140, then the 150. The Cessna 170 grew into the four-seat 172. Beechcraft was creating luxurious, pricier fast planes, positioning themselves as the Cadillacs of the sky with their successful Bonanza series. Mooney and Ercoupe focused on crafting airplanes that were both easy to fly and easy on the wallet, ensuring that there was something for every aspiring pilot. General aviation aircraft, especially the Cessnas, stood out for their durability. They could effortlessly switch from land to water with skis or floats, and their cockpit instrumentation was so advanced that even the smaller planes were fully equipped. Pilots could confidently navigate through clouds, adhering to instrument flight rules in their trusty 172s. Everything in the aviation world seemed to be in perfect harmony. However, the industry soon reached a point of saturation. The growth in the number of trained pilots and the overall demand for airplanes simply could not maintain pace with the rapid influx of new aircraft. Many of these planes boasted impressively long operational lifespans, with some remaining serviceable and in the air for periods ranging from 50 to 60 years. This resulted in a surplus of aircraft in the market, creating a glut that ultimately disrupted the economy of scale that had previously helped to manage costs. As a consequence of this imbalance, the cost per unit for aircraft rose significantly, creating economic challenges for the industry. On the regulatory front, the government stepped in to enhance safety in aviation, introducing stricter requirements and standards for obtaining a private pilot's license. This included the addition of a written test. However, the quest for safety transformed private pilot certification into a more comprehensive, challenging, and costly endeavour. Just as the aviation world was coming to terms with these changes, the 1973 oil crisis hit, sending aviation gas prices skyrocketing and adding yet another layer of complexity to the mix. This was quickly succeeded by an economic downturn that struck general aviation severely, embodying the old saying, "When the economy sneezes, aviation catches the flu." This economic hardship was then intensified by the 1979 fuel crisis. To add salt to the injury, in the 70s the FAA's certification rules got a lot tougher, which made it harder and more expensive to bring new planes into the market. It will be easy to argue that aviation has always been a costly endeavour, and when adjusted for inflation, it hasn't increased in expense all that much. However, if you take time to crunch the numbers, using averages and focusing on mainstream aircraft, particularly the Cessna 172s, 182s, Beech Bonanzas, and the SR-22s given their popularity, you would quickly realise how flawed that argument is. It's worth noting that today's aircraft are substantially more advanced than those from 50 years ago. But even with advancements in technology, there have been disproportionate spikes in costs. Insurance has long been a major cost driver in general aviation, and while this is nothing new, it is markedly higher today, even after adjusting for inflation. This increase can be attributed, in part, to the higher cost of aircraft today. Also adjusted for inflation, In 1960, a brand new Cessna 172 would set you back just a tad over $10,000, including taxes and delivery for a fresh off-the-line Cessna 172. Adjusted for inflation, that same aircraft today should cost around $104,000. However, we must acknowledge that the modern Cessna 172 is a different beast, boasting a slew of features that were simply non-existent in the original model. It's roomier, sports more advanced electronics, utilizes more aluminium, and is powered by a more reliable engine. But even with these enhancements, the starting price of a contemporary Cessna 172 is over 4 times its inflation-adjusted predecessor. The most obvious factor is the lack of economies of scale, since there are so many old Cessna 172s from the 1960s still flying around. Because of this, you can easily find a really good used Cessna 172 for less than $100,000. These used planes are the biggest competition and have the most influence on the prices of new aircraft. It's interesting to see that when legal rules changed and Cessna started making planes again, the value of used airplanes went up a lot. People saw the high prices of new Cessnas and realized their old planes were worth more than they thought, which was confirmed as they continued to sell well. This big increase in price isn't just because of insurance or government rules. It's really about how many planes are available and how many people want them. The General Aviation Manufacturers Association, GAMA, has shared that 1978 had more airplane sales than almost any year since World War II, except for a short spike in 1946. Looking back to 1947, the market had nearly 16,000 airplanes sold. But then, the numbers dropped below 10,000 and even under 4,000 until the 1950s, when things started to pick up again. This was probably when most of the leftover planes from World War II were retired. By the late 1960s, yearly sales were back over 10,000, reaching a high point in 1978 with 17,811 airplanes sold before dropping again. By 1981, sales were below 10,000 units per year, and in 1987, only 1,085 planes were delivered. Nowadays, the industry is selling just a few hundred airplanes a year, simply because there are too many planes available, and not as many people are getting pilot licenses because it's become more than 20% more expensive, even when you adjust for inflation. 20% might not seem like a lot, but flying is already really expensive. So this increase is enough to make a lot of people decide not to do it. What's happening in aviation does seem to suggest that regular salaries aren't keeping up with the rising cost of living, which includes hobbies like flying. This makes the gap even bigger, putting flying out of reach for many people. The purchasing power of average salaries is decreasing, while the costs associated with aviation are relentlessly rising. The simplistic aircraft of the past to today's advanced flying machines can't be compared, and modern aircraft undoubtedly offer exceptional performance levels. Purchasing a new fully equipped model, such as a Diamond DA-50, could cost up to $1 million. Even at the lower end of the spectrum, prices start at no less than $800,000, and this is before accounting for taxes. It's important to remember that 50 years ago, there were no fixed-gear planes available with the speeds and capabilities of today's models. While this comparison might be somewhat skewed, it is clear even to the untrained eye that the significant price difference cannot be attributed to inflation alone. The high manufacturing costs, driven by advanced technology and extensive research and development, play a crucial role and justify a substantial part of the high costs seen in today's aviation market. However, the main problem that's causing aviation prices to skyrocket comes from the fact that airplane manufacturers are producing a very small number of planes. This is an issue because when a company doesn't make a lot of a certain product, they increase the price of the little they do produce. They do this to cover their costs because it costs less per item to make a lot of them at once than it does to make just a few. So, when only a small number of planes are being made, the price for each individual plane ends up being extremely high. Wrapping things up, it's important to note that stricter rules have made it harder for airplanes without the latest equipment to access the airspace, which has resulted in increased costs. Aviation has always been an expensive field to be in, but now, even when you consider inflation, it's relatively more costly than in the past. There are several reasons for this, including not being able to take advantage of economies of scale due to low production numbers, a decrease in the number of pilots, expensive fuel, high insurance costs, costly airplane parts, and tough regulations. Additionally, there seems to be a general lack of interest in aviation, which also contributes to the problem.